I don't think I knew too much about Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You know, they were just getting going at the time. I'll tell you what, how I remember it. It was the summer, I believe, of 1969, and as far as the media was concerned, we were getting hot. You know, you couldn't do anything more attention-grabbing than use a Moog synthesizer somehow. So the Museum of Modern Art in New York City called us up and said, would you be interested in putting on a concert in our Jazz in the Garden series? The garden was the garden of the museum, was a sculpture garden. And they had a whole series of musicians who would, you know, put on outdoor concerts in that garden. Now, at the time, we had really no instruments at all that could be played live. But we decided, you know, this sounds like fun. And it turned out that we really didn't have enough time to design and build the perfect ensemble of instruments. But we did put 4 instruments together that could be played. One of them was polyphonic. It used a standard RMI piano, I think, a well-known electronic keyboard at the time, in conjunction with some of our modules. We had a drum synthesizer, sort of the precursor of the drum machine, and then we had 2 regular modular synthesizers that you could play one note at a time on. And all of these instruments were equipped with special preset boxes where you could set up a combination of things ahead of time and push a button and quickly change from one thing to the other. That's what you really need for a live performance. Well, we contact some of our musician friends and put on this concert. It was mobbed. There were 4,000 people in the garden of the Museum of Modern Art. The equipment didn't work all that well, but it had been built, and the musicians, of course, you know, if they had cigar boxes, they would have made great music. I guess that launched the use of Moog synthesizers as live performance instrument. After the concert, we had these instruments made up, and we wondered what to do with them. So we told our London distributor that they were available if anybody wanted them. And that was, somehow, I'm not sure what the arrangement was, but that's one of those is what Keith Emerson made Lucky Man on. I don't know whether he actually bought it at the time or whether it was on loan, whether Manfred Mann had it. I just don't know. But the first time I met Keith, he had just gotten this modular instrument, and they had just put down the synthesizer line for Lucky Man, and he gave me a test pressing of it. One of Keith's great talents is to approach a new instrument, a new electronic instrument, and without anybody explaining too much about it, to turn the knobs and flip a few switches to see what happens, and then immediately get an idea of how that can be used musically. Immediate, you know, it can happen in seconds. So, you know, some musicians take months and years to get a good idea, but Keith just got these ideas very fast. And I imagine that must have happened with Lucky Man, because what he came up with in a way of using the glide and getting just the right tone color are things that nobody had done up until then. Nobody had gotten that sound, and nobody had made those gestures with the with a modular synthesizer. And it it was something. Not only was it something brand new, it sounded great. The ribbon controller was an idea that we came up with fairly early, and by the time Keith began working with our modular synthesizer, the ribbon controller was a standard product. We never thought of it as something you would use with dramatic flair on stage. We thought of it as a way of continuously varying anything you plugged it into to control the synthesizer. So it could be used to change the tone color, it could be used to change the amount of modulation, it could be used to change the pitch. The only thing we didn't think of is what it would be like if you attached a rocket launcher to it, which is what Keith wound up doing. The individual pieces that Keith had were things that we had already developed. I think by 1970 or 1971, most of the stuff that we associate with Moog synthesizers had already been developed, the individual pieces. It's how you put them together into a music-producing system. Once Emerson, Lake and Palmer got going using this modular system on stage, we gave them our full technical support. We tried to improve these experimental preset boxes. And in fact, I think we built a complete new set for Keith. On several occasions, we rebuilt the modular system to make it more reliable and to add stuff. But that's a little bit different than saying, okay, we're going to adopt Emerson, Lake and Palmer. We provided similar services to other musicians. It's just that Emerson, Lake and Palmer used our instruments in a more broadly, more different ways, and also in a more visible way. And their requirements for customization were important to them, and by our working on that customization, it gave us a lot of good experience. Yeah, I can remember getting a call from Keith that in the wee hours of the morning in the United States, and he said he was in Tokyo, and the ribbon controller didn't work. And of course, the ribbon controller was a very important part of what Keith did on stage at that time. And as I remember it, this was a long time ago, as I remember it, I guessed that moisture was accumulating on the ribbon controller and shorting out the parts of it that would make it malfunction. And I suggested to Keith that he clean the whole thing off with alcohol and see what happens. And I think that did the trick. It does get very humid in Tokyo, and when you combine humidity with the salt of your sweat when you're playing and the oils from your hand, that can short out the kind of ribbon controller that we made at the time. I really admired Greg. He was his voice sounded so great. It was, so smooth and musical and lyrical. I don't remember having anything to do technically with him. I don't remember talking with him at all about what electronics he might be interested in. As I remember it, he was very happy to play bass and guitar, and of course to sing. I don't think there was anything beyond that as far as we were concerned. Carl was interested in experimenting with electronics. And at one point, we built an experimental set of drum pads from, this is before there was such a thing as electronic drum pads. And we put something together out of sheet rubber and foam and some sensors in. And, I and the engineers I was working with played it with sticks, and they seemed to respond nicely and made some interesting sounds. Gave it to Carl, and of course it was destroyed within a day or two. We had no idea how hard Carl hits things when he plays, and we just didn't make the sensors or the stuff around the sensors anywhere near strong enough to take it. But I think that was the beginning of Carl's interest in using electronic sounds. And he liked being able to make the electronic sounds. What he didn't like is that the things broke on him.